You picked the wrong black woman to push around tonight. General Veronica Carter's voice is calm, almost bored, as Officer Nolan wrenches her arm up between her shoulder blades. The cuffs bite into her skin, metal edges slicing just enough to sting. Mouthing off to an officer, Captain Riker says, stepping close, his bulk filling her vision. That's how people like you end up with problems. Carter studies his badge number, nameplate, the fading scar at his jawline. Search her, Riker orders. Nolan's fingers dig into her ribs while he pats her down, fishing out her wallet, phone, and keys, dropping them into a plastic evidence bag without care. You find something entertaining? Riker asks when he catches her unshaken expression. Carter offers nothing, eyes steady. They never find the slim military commem device stitched inside her jacket lining, no bigger than a stick of gum. Get her in the car, Riker snaps. A night in holding might fix that attitude. Nolan shoves her, forcing her to duck into the back of the cruiser, palm on her head, like she's already convicted. They have no idea who they've just handcuffed. At Greenfield Station, buzzing fluorescent lights hum over stained tiles, the air thick with sweat and disinfectant. Carter stands motionless for her mugshot. Flash pops. Name. The booking clerk doesn't look up. Veronica Carter. Her tone is clipped. Professional. Address. She gives her Oakwood Terrace apartment number. The clerk pauses, eyes sharpening. That's in Ridgeview Park? His voice changes, revealing what he thinks about that mostly black neighborhood. Carter presses her thumb to the scanner. Digital ink smears across her print. Behind her, Riker and Nolan lean against the water cooler, laughing loudly. Another one out of that area thinks she's special, Nolan says, making sure she hears. Acted like checkpoint rules don't apply, Riker replies. Had to remind her. Carter commits every word to memory, every smirk, every inflection. Phone call? She asks the clerk. He gestures at the wall phone. One call. Make it matter. Carter dials from memory. Not her attorney, not her family. Operations Center, Pentagon, answers a crisp, controlled voice. Authorization. Echo Sierra 829, Carter says clearly. Initiating Oversight Protocol Delta. Location transmitting now. A short pause. Confirmed, General Carter. Response teams deploying. Timeline 43 minutes. Carter hangs up just as Councilman Marcus Ellison strides into the station, championship ring flashing beneath harsh lights. Another agitator? Ellison asks, peering through the glass at her. Riker nods. Just finished booking her, sir. Good, Ellison says. These checkpoint resistors need consequences. The program's too critical. Moments later, Carter is escorted to a holding cell. The door slams like a verdict. She sits, posture straight, face unreadable. A battered analog clock on the wall reads 9:17 p.m. exactly. 43 minutes from now, the entire situation will flip. 2 hours earlier, the sunset had bled orange over Ridgeview Park as General Veronica Carter guided her aging sedan down streets she knew by heart. The houses slowly gave way to bigger yards and manicured hedges of Greenfield's affluent, mostly white suburbs. Up ahead, red and blue lights strobed across the intersection. Police cruisers formed a makeshift barrier. A checkpoint. Carter eased off the gas, rolling her window down before they even waved her forward. She'd broken no laws. This should have been nothing. Routine. Seconds, not hours. Officer Nolan approached with his flashlight already up, beam slicing across her face. License and registration, he said, like a script he'd repeated all evening. Carter moved slowly toward the glove box. "May I ask the purpose of this checkpoint, officer?" she asked. Voice polite. "Measured." Nolan stiffened. "Routine stop. ID now." She handed over her license. He studied it all a beat too long, light lingering over the printed address. "Ridgeview Park resident," he said into his radio, sounding out the neighborhood like a warning. "Requesting additional verification." Carter heard the subtle emphasis. "Is there an issue with my identification?" Nolan didn't answer. He walked back to his cruiser, license in hand. Through her rearview mirror, Carter watched Nolan show her license to another officer. They glanced at her car, then at each other, laughing like a private joke. From the command SUV, Captain Riker emerged, every step deliberate. Nolan pointed toward Carter's sedan. Riker nodded and strode over, hand resting casually near his holster. "Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." The word "ma'am" carried no respect. "Why?" Carter asked. "My license is valid." "Out. Now!" His fingers brushed his weapon, a silent threat. "We're running enhanced search protocol." Carter knew that phrase. Enhanced searches required reasonable suspicion. "What's your articulated suspicion, Captain?" Riker's face tightened. "Out of the car." She complied, movements controlled and unhurried. "I'd like it noted this appears to be selective enforcement," Carter said, placing her palms on the hood as instructed. "We decide what's selective," Riker sneered. "Hands flat." "I do not consent to a search of my vehicle without probable cause," Carter said, calmly. "Terry v. Ohio and Delaware v. Prowse give clear." "Oh, we've got a lawyer," Nolan interrupted, stepping in. "Closer. Thinks she knows the law." Carter kept her voice even. "I'm familiar with my Fourth Amendment protections." Riker came within inches of her ear. "People like you always want to make this difficult." "People like me?" she asked. "Troublemakers," he replied, though they both understood what he really meant. Other drivers watched from their cars, phones raised. Riker spotted them and motioned to Officer Davis. "Clear these vehicles. No recordings." Carter watched Davis walk car to car, making people lower their phones, sending them through with barely a glance. She cataloged each face, badge, and license plate, every officer at the scene. "Last chance," Riker said, stepping back. "Consent to the search or we hit you with obstruction." "I respectfully decline and request a supervisor," Carter replied. Her tone never wavered. "I am the supervisor." Riker flicked his chin at Nolan. "Detain her." Nolan grabbed her arm, twisting it up and back. Pain shot through her shoulder. "Stop resisting," he shouted. Carter didn't fight. "I am not resisting," she stated clearly, projecting her voice. "I'm complying under protest." She knew the audio mattered. Riker stepped in, crowding her space. "You don't get to tell us how to do our jobs." Carter glanced down just as Nolan's body camera light blinked from red to dark. "Your camera seems to have stopped recording, Officer Nolan," she observed. "Mind your business," he snarled, tightening the cuffs until her fingers tingled. Her training whispered 10 different ways to put him on the pavement, to disarm Riker before anyone could blink. But that wasn't tonight's mission. "I'll be filing a formal complaint," she said instead, voice still smooth. Riker laughed. "Sure, file away. Councilman Ellison personally oversees these checkpoints. Your complaint goes straight to his trash can." Carter's watch pressed against her wrist, the embedded micro device quietly capturing every word. "Search the car," Riker ordered another officer. "You can't do that without a warrant," Carter began. "City Ordinance 28-9, Riker cut in. Signed by the council last month. We've got full checkpoint authority. Carter knew all about that ordinance, where it broke constitutional lines, who had pushed it through, and which neighborhoods bore the brunt. Anything? Riker called to the officer, rifling through her vehicle. Looks clear, sir, came the reply. Check under the seats, Riker insisted. These Ridgeview folks always hiding something. Carter's fingertips brushed a subtle button on her wristwatch. The GPS beacon snapped fully online, pinging her location straight into Pentagon systems. Real-time monitoring confirmed. Still nothing, Captain, the searching officer finally reported. Riker turned back, frustration sharpening his tone. You're still obstructing a lawful checkpoint. Quoting constitutional law isn't obstruction, Carter replied. And now you're arguing, Riker said. Good enough, he nodded at Nolan. Cuff her. The metal bit down again as Nolan tightened the restraints with unnecessary force. Veronica Carter, Riker announced, clearly enjoying himself. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice and resisting a lawful checkpoint inspection. Carter saw a young woman in a nearby SUV quietly filming. Their eyes met. Carter gave the faintest nod, telling her, "Keep recording." Riker droned through the Miranda warnings. You have the right to remain silent. I'm well aware of my Miranda rights, Captain, Carter said. I assume I'll be transported to the Greenfield station? Riker hesitated, thrown off by her poise. That's right. I'll require my phone call upon arrival. You'll get what we say you get, Nolan muttered, shoving her towards the cruiser. As they walked her past the checkpoint, Carter watched Officer Davis wave another Ridgeview Park driver towards secondary screening, while 3 cars with white drivers rolled straight through. Pattern confirmed, she thought. Data stacking. Nolan forced her head down and into the back seat. Officer Nolan, badge number 5183, Carter said clearly as she ducked into the car. This level of force is unnecessary and excessive. Her watch recorded everything. Shut up, Nolan snapped, slamming the door. Through the glass, Carter saw Riker talking with another officer, gesturing vaguely toward Ridgeview in the distance. Both of them laughing. The cruiser pulled away. Carter leaned back against the vinyl seat, closing her eyes for a moment. She mentally walked through the Pentagon protocol she'd just triggered. Chain of command, notification tree, evidence capture, oversight, triggers. The situation was unfolding almost exactly as predicted. All it needed was time. In Greenfield Station's interrogation room, the smell of stale coffee lingered thick. Harsh light from a single bulb drilled into the metal tabletop, bolted to the floor. Carter sat straight, as if she were still in uniform, hands cuffed tight in front of her. 2 hours had crawled by since the stop. The door opened with a squeak. Captain Riker walked in, carrying a thin folder and a plastic tray holding her confiscated items. He dropped both with theatrical carelessness, then leaned on the table. Comfortable? He asked, wearing a smile that never touched his eyes. Carter met his gaze without answering. Silence had its own power. Riker flipped open the folder. Veronica Carter, Ridgeview Park address, no priors, he snorted. First time learning how checkpoints really work? I'd like to speak with a lawyer, Carter said. Her tone stayed level, every word precise. Soon enough, Riker circled the table like a cheap imitation of an interrogator. We're just talking. I'm invoking my right to counsel, she repeated. Now, he ignored her. We've got a problem in this town, he said. People who don't respect authority. People who think rules don't apply to them. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, studying her like a puzzle. Checkpoints keep Greenfield safe. Folks who complain usually have something to hide. Carter stayed silent. Her military training had included resisting far more skilled interrogators. Riker's amateur performance wouldn't crack a new recruit. Riker flipped through her wallet, brows lifting as he pulled out a laminated card. "Interesting little ID," he said. He held up her military credential, 4 silver stars glinting under the overhead light. "United States Marine Corps, 4-star General." He laughed, tossing it onto the table. "Cute, real cute. Add impersonating an officer to the pile." Carter watched him carefully. "That identification is legitimate," she said. "Sure," Riker replied. "And I'm the Secretary of Defense." His phone buzzed. He checked the screen, smirk fading slightly. "Our concerned citizens here," he said, moving toward the door. "Somebody wants to meet our latest checkpoint scholar." Carter listened as he stepped out into the hallway. Through the thin walls, she heard a new voice, confident, impatient, and used to being obeyed. "Another one from that neighborhood?" the man asked. "Councilman Ellison," she guessed. "Yes, sir," Riker replied. "Gave us the usual constitutional sermon, even flashed some fake military ID." "Military?" Ellison sounded intrigued. "What branch?" "Marines." "Claims she's a general," Riker said, laughter carrying through. "Get what you need and move her along," Ellison replied. "We have to make examples, or the checkpoints mean nothing." Carter stared at the one-way glass, feeling Ellison's eyes on the other side. The door opened again. Riker returned with Officer Nolan, both wearing matching smirks. Riker slapped a form onto the table. "Sign this confession," he said. "Obstruction, minor charge. You'll walk out by morning with a slap on the wrist." Carter studied the paper without touching it. "I won't sign anything without counsel present," she said. Nolan stepped forward, looming behind her. "Chair!" "The captain asked nicely," he said. "And I respectfully declined," Carter answered. Riker nodded to Nolan, who rested both hands heavily on her shoulders. "You people from Ridgeview Park think you're special," Riker said. "Think rules are optional. Councilman Ellison's checkpoint program has cut crime in Greenfield 30%. "By targeting certain neighborhoods?" Carter asked. Riker's jaw tightened. "By enforcing the law where it's needed." "Selective enforcement isn't justice," she replied calmly. Nolan's fingers dug into her shoulders. "You ought to listen when the captain talks," he said. Carter didn't flinch. "This interview is over until my attorney arrives," she said. Riker scooped up her belongings again, accidentally knocking her military ID to the floor. He stepped on it as he walked around the table, grinding his heel down. "This little dress-up act doesn't impress anyone," he sneered, then bent and picked the card up between 2 fingers. "I'll admit, you nailed the details. 4 stars, though? That's ambitious." He flicked it back onto the table dismissively. Nolan tightened his grip. "We've got all night," Riker said. "Plenty of time for you to rethink that signature." A sharp knock cut through the tension. The door opened before Riker answered. Detective Leo Marquez stood in the doorway, early 40s, eyes sharp and quietly observant. His badge hung from a chain against a well-fitted suit that somehow still looked like standard issue. "Captain," Marquez said. "Got a minute?" Riker hesitated, annoyed at the interruption. "Harris," he started, then caught himself. "Nolan, watch her." Nolan's hands remained on Carter's shoulders. The door closed. Raised voices bled through the wall. Marquez's steady. Riker's angrier. Another knock, harder this time. The door opened again. Marquez entered first, followed by a noticeably unsettled Riker. Marquez picked up Carter's military ID and rotated it under the light. "Yike, Captain," Marquez said, eyes on the holographic seal. "This ID has the correct security features: hologram rotation, microprinting, UV watermarking, all consistent with authentic military issue." Riker snorted. "It's a good fake." "No, sir," Marquez said, setting the card down with care. "I served before joining the department. This is real." Riker's confidence slipped. "Then she stole it. Add that." "Ma'am," Marquez addressed Carter respectfully. "Name and rank for the record?" "General Veronica Carter, United States Marine Corps." Marquez straightened instinctively at the title. "And what brings you to Greenfield, General?" he started. "Detective," Riker cut in. "She's being processed for obstructing checkpoint procedures. Her job is irrelevant." "Sir, if she's active duty, we have protocols," Marquez said. "Jurisdiction issues." Riker stepped closer to him. "I'm handling this." "Department policy requires verification of any military credentials," Marquez replied. "Section 14 of the procedure manual." "I know the manual," Riker snapped. "Then you know we're already out of bounds," Marquez said evenly. "Requested counsel, ignored. Continued questioning after invocation. Extended detention without proper booking." Riker's jaw flexed. "Detective, remember your place." "My place is making sure we follow our own rules," Marquez said. He lifted the ID again, eyes catching on the tiny rank insignia. His expression changed. "Sir," he murmured, lowering his voice, "these are 4 stars." "In the Marine Corps? That's the top," Marquez continued quietly. "There are only a handful of officers at that level." He looked at Carter differently now, weighing everything he'd walked into. "It's still a fake," Riker said stubbornly. The door swung open again. Councilman Ellison stepped in without knocking, suit perfect, signet ring gleaming. "Captain, what's the holdup?" he demanded. "I thought this was routine." His gaze landed on Carter, assessing her as if she were a potential headline. "Councilman," Marquez said, "we may have a complication. This woman appears to be a high-ranking military officer." Ellison scoffed. "Based on what?" "Military identification consistent with a Marine general," Marquez said carefully. "We should verify through proper channels before going any further," Marquez continued. "Detective." Ellison squinted at his badge. "Marquez, your enthusiasm for procedure is not unnoticed, but let the captain do his job." "Sir, if we've detained a general improperly, the department could face serious if," Ellison stressed. "That's a very large if." He turned to Riker. "Handle the paperwork and finish processing her." "Detective Marquez, there are other matters you could attend to." Marquez held his ground. "At minimum, we should make a verification call. It's quick." Ellison stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You're new to Greenfield, aren't you, Detective?" "Transferred about 8 months ago, sir," Marquez answered. "Then let me explain how things operate here," Ellison said, tone condescending. "These checkpoints are vital to Greenfield's security and property values. Some people complain. We deal with it quietly and efficiently." "By ignoring civil rights?" Marquez asked. Ellison's smile thinned. "By preserving order. Don't overcomplicate your role." The phone mounted on the wall rang suddenly, shattering the moment. Everyone stared at it. Riker picked up. "Captain Riker." His expression shifted from irritation to confusion. "What kind of call?" he asked. "From where?" The color drained slightly from his face. "Yes, sir." "She's here." "Well?" Ellison demanded when Riker hung up. "Who was that?" "The Pentagon," Riker said slowly. "They asked about General Carter." Silence flooded the room. Ellison and Riker exchanged a look that edged toward panic. "Probably some friends fooling around," Ellison said after a beat. "Captain, release the general immediately, apologize, and we can all forget." "There's more," Riker interrupted. "They're sending people. A military investigative unit." Ellison's smooth facade cracked. "What kind of unit?" "They mentioned oversight of our checkpoint program," Riker admitted. "Specifically." Ellison turned to Carter, putting the pieces together. "You didn't just stumble into that checkpoint, did you?" Carter said nothing, but her expression was answer enough. The phones at the front desk began ringing in rapid succession, urgent voices echoing through the station. Riker's radio crackled. "Captain, we're getting multiple calls asking about a General Carter," the dispatcher said. "From where?" Riker asked. "Pentagon, Department of Justice, Governor's office," came the strained reply. "Handle it," Ellison snapped. "We're handling it," Riker said, though he sounded far from sure. "They keep asking why she's in custody." Marquez stepped closer to Carter. "General, would you like those handcuffs removed?" he asked quietly. "Detective," Ellison warned. "She's been confirmed by the Pentagon," Marquez said. "Continuing to restrain her is—" "My decision," Ellison cut in. He pointed at Carter. "Whatever power play you're running ends now." Carter's eyes stayed calm. "This isn't a game, Councilman." "It's an investigation," she said. Ellison laughed once, too loudly. "Investigation into what?" "Systemic civil rights violations baked into your checkpoint operation," Carter replied. "Targeting black and brown neighborhoods, ignoring Fourth Amendment protections, setting unofficial quotas by race and zip code." Ellison's face hardened. "Those are wild accusations." "Documented patterns," Carter corrected. Riker's radio crackled again. "Captain, we've got several black SUVs pulling into the lot. Looks like military." Ellison's political instincts shifted from arrogance to survival. He turned toward Riker. "Release her. Now. Call it a misunderstanding. Blame the officers at the scene." Riker hesitated. "Sir, Nolan followed your checkpoint guidelines to the letter." "Then blame the guidelines," Ellison hissed. "Just keep this contained." Marquez stepped forward, fishing a small USB drive from his pocket. He slid it across the table to Carter, with his fingers partially covering it from the other's view. "Internal Affairs has been trying to dig into the checkpoint program," he murmured. "We kept running into walls. Disappearing files, closed doors." "You've been collecting what you can," Carter said quietly. Marquez nodded. "Locations, stop rates, arrest numbers, internal memos. It's not everything, but it's enough to see the pattern." "It's time, General," he whispered. The interrogation room door swung open again. A tall man in full dress, uniform, stepped inside, a silver eagle on his shoulders. "Colonel Jackson," Carter acknowledged as he scanned the room, followed by two military police officers in crisp uniforms. He turned to her and snapped a crisp salute. "General Carter," he said. She returned it. "Appreciate the swift response, Colonel." "Of course, ma'am," he replied. He faced the others. "I'm Colonel David Jackson, Pentagon Investigative Services. These are my team members." Ellison moved quickly, turning on his charm. "Councilman Marcus Ellison, Greenfield City Council," he said. "This whole thing has been an unfortunate misunderstanding." "Councilman," Jackson said firmly, "please remain in the building. My team will be speaking with you shortly." Ellison blinked. "Questioning? I assure you I had no knowledge of any improper detention." "Noted," Jackson said, his tone neutral. He turned to Riker. "Captain, secure this room for General Carter's use. We'll need your main conference room as our command area." Riker bristled. "Colonel, This is a municipal police station. You don't have jurisdiction here. I'm operating under direct authority from the Secretary of Defense, Jackson said, unbothered. You will cooperate. That is not a request. Outside, the station echoed with the sound of boots, urgent voices, radios, crackling. Technicians in military uniforms moved briskly toward the conference room, carrying cases of equipment. Files were boxed. Computers were claimed for forensic imaging. Ellison watched the controlled chaos with growing alarm. This reaction is excessive, he protested. For a simple detention mix-up, he added. This isn't about a mix-up, Carter said, standing. It's about a program that treats an entire neighborhood as suspicious by default. She stepped closer to Jackson. Status? Multiple teams deployed as ordered, General, Jackson reported. Evidence preservation in effect. We've instructed all local systems not to alter or delete any checkpoint-related data. Good, Carter said. Governor's office? Being briefed by our liaison, Jackson replied. Riker's radio buzzed again. Captain, media scanners are lighting up. Somebody posted video from the checkpoint. It's spreading. Ellison swore under his breath. We need to get in front of this, he muttered. Message control, optics. We can still... Yeah, Councilman, Carter interrupted. You can't spend 6 months of unconstitutional stops. Marquez frowned. 6 months? Carter nodded. The Pentagon's been watching Greenfield's checkpoint rollout since day one. Anonymous complaints, stop data, demographic breakdowns. Tonight was the final confirmation. She glanced at the still-locked cuffs on the table. And you handed it to us? Ellison forced a laugh. You expect anyone to buy that the Pentagon cares about some local traffic stops? They care when Department of Defense personnel are repeatedly told to avoid a U.S. city because of discriminatory policing, Carter replied. They care when federal installations in the region report officers targeting their service members off base. Ellison's smile finally vanished. The front desk phones rang nonstop now, a constant electronic wail. Officers moved in jittery bursts, glancing at the incoming military presence with unease. Riker looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Jackson checked his watch. General, the DOJ liaison is patching in within minutes, he said. They'll coordinate with our legal team. Make sure they have Marquez's data, Carter said. All of it. Marquez straightened, surprised she'd used his name. Yes, ma'am, Jackson replied, handing the USB to one of his techs. Ellison stepped toward the door. I need to make some calls, he said. My constituents... Your calls won't change the facts, Councilman, Carter said. This investigation has federal oversight and teeth. Ellison's hand froze on the doorknob as 2 MPs moved subtly closer, not blocking him yet, but ready. Marquez glanced between them, realizing how far this had already escalated. General, he said quietly, Internal Affairs tried to escalate concerns before. They got buried. They won't this time, Carter said. You did your part, Detective. Now it's bigger than this station. Riker lingered by the wall, clearly torn between loyalty to his chain of command and fear of the Colonel's authority. Jackson's radio crackled. Colonel, we've secured digital backups of all checkpoint logs, body cam archives, and ordnance communications. Copy, Jackson replied. Keep a separate chain of custody log for anything tied to Councilman Ellison's office. Ellison's head snapped toward him. Excuse me, he said. Your ordinance is central to this, Carter replied. We have 6 months of data showing stops concentrated on Ridgeview Park and adjacent majority-minority districts with significantly lower enforcement in affluent, whiter areas. Ellison shook his head. You're misreading the numbers. Higher crime concentration. Save it for your attorney, Carter said. We have videos, internal memos, and a city ordinance written so broadly it practically invites selective enforcement. Marquez exhaled slowly. General, he said, if it means anything, not everyone here signed up for this kind of policing. A lot of us stayed quiet. Carter met his eyes. Silence is how systems like this survive, Detective. But speaking up now still matters. Jackson's phone buzzed. He checked the encrypted message. DOJ wants a preliminary briefing within the hour, he said. They're requesting copies of all recorded statements, including tonight's checkpoint and anything said in this room. Carter glanced at her watch. My device captured the entire encounter with Nolan and Riker, she said. Audio, timestamps, GPS. Jackson nodded. We'll sync it with video that's already circulating. It'll help map out the pattern of stops. Ellison rubbed his forehead, suddenly looking older. You're going to blow up a program that's lowered crime in this city, he said. You're going to scare away business, tank property values. We're going to stop a program that trades civil rights for comfort, Carter replied. In the hallway, an officer hurried past with a box of physical files marked Checkpoint Ops, Greenfield. An MP followed, logging every step. The station's usual noisy confidence had been replaced by a tight, strained quiet. General, Marquez said, what happens to the officers who followed orders? Carter considered him. There's a difference between executing a policy and abusing it, she said. Investigators will look at patterns. Some people made honest mistakes inside a corrupt structure. Others leaned on that structure to justify bias and violence. She glanced pointedly at Riker and Nolan. Those distinctions matter. Ellison folded his arms. And what about me, he asked, the big bad politician who wrote the ordinance? You championed it, Carter said. You pushed it through over community objections. You ignored warnings from civil rights groups. That's not just bad politics. It's evidence of intent. You think a jury's going to buy that? Ellison shot back. I've won every election in this city for a decade. Carter's expression didn't change. You wrote a law that treated my community as a threat to be managed, she said. A law you never expected to apply to someone like me. Jackson checked his notes. General, media's reporting on a high-ranking Marine detained at a racially targeted checkpoint, he said. Governor's office is asking if you intend to speak publicly. Not yet, Carter replied. Evidence first, then statements. The dispatcher's voice came over Riker's radio again. Captain, reporters are already outside, she said. They're asking about military vehicles at the station. Riker looked at Jackson, waiting for instructions. No statements from local officers, Jackson said. All inquiries go through Pentagon or DOJ Public Affairs. Riker nodded, shoulders sagging with reluctant relief. Marquez quietly moved closer to Carter. For what it's worth, General, he said, seeing someone with your rank sitting in that chair, it shook some people. Maybe that's what it took. It shouldn't require stripes or stars for people to be treated like citizens, Carter replied. But if my rank gets us here, I'm going to use it. Marquez nodded once. Resolute. An MP stepped into the doorway. Colonel, the conference room is ready, she said. Secure network is live. DOJ liaison on standby. Thank you, Jackson replied. He turned to Carter. We'll transfer you there. You'll have full access to our briefings. Good, Carter said. I want eyes on every data set and policy document tied to these checkpoints. Ellison raised a hand. Am I under arrest? He demanded. At this moment, you're being asked to remain available for questioning, Jackson said. Depending on what we find, that status may change. I have rights, Ellison protested. You do, Carter agreed. The same ones your ordinance helped strip from thousands of people driving home from work. Ellison stared at her, the reality finally sinking in. The easy swagger, the smug certainty he'd radiated at the station's entrance, it all seemed to drain away. You set this up, he said. You went through the checkpoint on purpose. I drove home from my neighborhood, Carter replied. The fact that doing so triggered all this says more about your system than about me. Jackson's radio buzzed again. Colonel, our texts confirm widespread disparities in stop patterns, came a voice. Ridgeview Park and adjacent zones show triple the rate of detentions compared to similar crime indices elsewhere. Log it, Jackson said. Carter exhaled slowly. This was never just about my detention, Councilman. It's about what it exposes. Outside the interrogation room, military specialists moved like a quiet storm through the station, gathering servers, imaging hard drives, sealing boxes with evidence tape. Greenfield's usual power structure had been flipped on its head in under an hour. The officers who'd laughed at Carter now avoided her gaze. General, teams are in place, Jackson said. Evidence preservation protocol fully active. Pentagon liaison confirms the governor's on board with joint federal review. Carter looked once more at the scuffed metal table, the cuffs lying open on its surface. Then we move forward, she said. We follow the data, we follow the law, and we let the system answer for itself. Ellison swallowed hard as two MPs stepped closer. This is ridiculous, Ellison explodes, pushing away from the wall. I have rights. Yes, Carter replies evenly. You do. So does everyone else. That's the entire problem. She and Colonel Jackson moved to the conference room, now turned into a full-blown command hub. Screens cover the walls, glowing with maps of checkpoint locations threaded between Ridgeview Park and wealthy suburbs. Marquez steps in, arms full of case files. General, I brought everything we talked about. Appreciated, Detective, Carter says. Your work's been indispensable. Officers escort Ellison and Riker inside, seating them far apart. Nolan follows a moment later, eyes darting nervously around the room, completely out of his depth. Carter stands at the head of the long table, the quiet hum of equipment filling the room. Conversations die instantly. Gentlemen, she begins, voice steady but unmistakably authoritative. Half a year ago, the Pentagon started getting repeated complaints about a checkpoint initiative here in Greenfield, overwhelmingly targeting communities of color. She taps a control. The largest monitor shifts to a city map peppered with red markers. Our early review suggested routine Fourth Amendment problems, she continues. Further digging showed something worse. The red points cluster thickly over Ridgeview Park and similar districts. That pattern is not random, Carter says. It's deliberate, and you built it that way. Checkpoint stops that escalated to full searches, Carter continues, switching the graphic. 89% involved drivers from minority communities. Arrests stemming from those searches, 94% black or brown residents. Riker shifts in his chair. Crime stats justified deployment, he mutters. We go where the numbers point. Traffic violations occur at roughly equal rates across all groups, Carter cuts in, pulling up a neutral traffic study. Yet your checkpoints somehow produce these wildly skewed outcomes. She hits another command. Internal emails fill the screen. Captain Riker, she says, highlighting one. Your message from March 12th. Prioritize vehicles from Ridgeview. Better arrest yields. The blood drains from his face. That email's out of context, Riker protests. We were discussing prior warrants. Context, Carter says, is what all these other documents provide. Another screen pops up. A spreadsheet of arrest targets. These are your informal quotas, she continues. Explicitly tied to Ridgeview residents, Ellison jumps in. General, daily operational decisions were the department's responsibility. As councilman, I merely approved the overall framework. Carter's gaze swivels. Is that as so? She asks calmly. She nods toward Jackson. The colonel brings up a new file. On screen, a detailed checkpoint operations directive appears, ending with Ellison's electronic signature. This directive, Carter says, spells out neighborhood targeting in black and white. Your approval made profiling official policy. Ellison's polished political mask fractures. This is a sham, he snaps. Some kind of vendetta. No, Carter answers. This is accountability. She turns to Marquez. Detective, tell them what you uncovered from inside their own house. Marquez steps forward, jaw tight. 6 months ago, I started noticing disturbing patterns in checkpoint arrest, he says. When I raised concerns with supervisors, I was suddenly reassigned. He opens a folder. I kept digging off the clock. Officers were told to apply different standards based on race and address. Cars from Ridgeview got extra scrutiny no matter how clean the driving. Riker cuts in. That's not. Your body cam footage disagrees, Carter says. She cues another video. On screen, Riker stands briefing officers before a checkpoint. His recorded voice fills the room. Remember, Ridgeview plates get the full workup. Make the stop stick. The clip ends. Silence stretches. Ellison abruptly stands. I need to contact my attorney. You'll have that opportunity, Carter replies, after we finish this session. She slides a thick folder across the table toward Riker. These are just from the last 6 months, she says. As he flips through pages, complaints, videos, transcripts, his complexion goes ash gray. Outside the glass, the station buzzes with activity as the investigation grinds relentlessly forward, hour after hour, through the night. Military analyst work. In shifts, cataloging evidence. Forensics teams, image department servers, preserving every byte. Legal advisors quietly mark possible charges on yellow sticky notes. In a quieter corner, away from the main cluster of screens, Carter finds Marquez hunched over a stack of records. Detective, she says, taking a seat beside him, what you done here? It matters. He looks up, eyes rimmed red. I should have pushed harder, earlier. You pushed against a rigged system, Carter replies. That takes more courage than you think. He shuts the folder with a soft thud. When I transferred here, the checkpoint program was already running, he says, marketed as some breakthrough in community safety. When did you realize what it really was? Carter asks. Marquez hesitates, jaw working. About 3 months back, he says finally. My older brother came to visit, drove in from out of town. His voice roughens. They stopped him at one of Ellison's checkpoints, pulled him out of his car, held him for hours, no charges, just intimidation. He looks at his hands. He's a pediatric surgeon, drives a nice car, but all they saw was a black man who didn't belong. And that was enough, Carter says quietly, finishing the thought he can't swallow. Marquez nods once, the memory clearly still raw. I filed formal complaints, Marquez continues. Followed every internal rule. The paperwork just vanished. Witnesses suddenly couldn't recall what they'd told me. Supervisors warned me to stop asking questions if I wanted a future here. He shakes his head. The system folded in on itself to protect the checkpoints. That's why I'm here, Carter says. When an institution can't or won't clean its own house, outside pressure becomes necessary. Marquez studies her. Why you, though? Why send a four-star general into a local policing mess? Carter leans back. Because some problems bleed across lines. Civil rights failures don't stay local. They corrode trust everywhere, including in the military. They weaken the very Constitution we swear to defend, Carter adds. Marquez absorbs that, shoulders heavy. So what happens to them, he asks quietly. To Riker, to Ellison, to all the officers who went along. They'll face the process they denied others, Carter says. Due process, evidence, trials. He swallows. And the people they hurt? The families? The jobs lost? Records ruined? Part of the remedy is reviewing every case touched by these checkpoints, Carter explains. Dismissals where appropriate, records cleared, compensation where possible. She meets his gaze. Your brother's case will be among the first. Marquez blinks rapidly, then nods. This isn't just today, is it, General? No, Carter says. It's about every traffic stop that turned into a life sentence of consequences, and every future stop that won't happen this way again. Marquez straightens, his professional armor settling back into place. What do you need from me next? He asks. Evidence consolidation, Carter answers. Your testimony will be central when this hits a federal grand jury. I'll be there, he says. For the first time since the checkpoint, a small, genuine smile touches her face. I never doubted it. Outside, dawn begins to gray the edges of the sky above Greenfield Station. But inside, the work doesn't slow. By sunrise, the parking lot is crowded with federal sedans and unmarked SUVs. FBI agents confer with military investigators near the entrance. Justice Department attorneys arrive, arms full of case binders and subpoena packets. Inside the command room, the tone has shifted from exploratory investigation to active prosecution planning. Evidence boards dominate the walls, string and notes connecting faces to actions, policies to harms when computer screens scroll through compiled data sets. Riker sits isolated in one corner, his officers seated far from him, no longer sure where loyalty lies. Ellison's lawyer arrived hours earlier, whispering frantically advice that the councilman seems too stunned and arrogant to fully heed. Colonel Jackson steps into the conference room with a fresh group of officials. General, he says, the secretary sends his regards. The matter's now formally designated a joint task force operation. Carter nods once. Then we proceed with the full briefing, she says. Chairs fill quickly, senior military staff, DOJ lawyers, state prosecutors, a representative from the governor's office, even someone from the Attorney General's senior team. Carter moves to the front of the room. Conversations taper off until the only sound is the low hum of electronics. Ladies and gentlemen, she begins, what started as routine oversight has uncovered something far deeper. A sustained pattern of constitutional abuse and power misused, Carter continues. Today, I'll walk you through the evidence. She clicks the remote. We've organized it into 3 primary categories: visual records, audio documentation, and written communications. The main display comes alive with a still frame from dashcam footage. First visual, she says. The video rolls. A Ridgeview driver, calm and respectful, is ordered out of his car without any articulated cause. Officers search without consent. When he questions the legality, they arrest him for obstruction. Clip after clip cycles through. Different faces, same script, over and over again. The pattern becomes impossible to dismiss as coincidence. "Oh, we see consistent divergence in treatment," Carter narrates. Split-screen footage appears. White drivers from affluent areas wave through after minimal questions. Black drivers from Ridgeview pulled aside, searched, detained. Checkpoint cameras documented who was stopped and for how long, she explains. White drivers encountered extended stops just 8% of the time. Black drivers from Ridgeview? 82%. Ellison tries again. "You can splice video to show anything," he argues. "Context matters." "These are your department's own unedited recordings," Carter replies. "Full timestamps, continuous footage. Your cameras documented your disparities better than any outside critic could." On another screen, a glowing heat map shows checkpoint positions choking off Ridgeview. "Your public justification cited traffic flow and safety," Carter says, "but your own traffic study recommended entirely different locations." She pulls that study onto the screen beside the heat map. The difference is obvious. Next category, audio. She taps another file. Riker's amplified voice fills the room. "Councilman wants higher numbers out of Ridgeview. Make it happen." Nolan's voice follows. "Even if there's nothing obvious?" Riker's answer, "Find something. Bad taillight, lane change, anything. Get them out of the car. You'll turn something up." Ellison leaps to his feet. "Those could be anyone," he insists. "People sound alike." Voice print analysis confirmed the identities, Carter responds. Recorded during official department briefings, another audio clip plays. This time, it's Ellison's voice. "These checkpoints do two jobs. Safety is what we sell on camera. Protecting property values is what we're really doing. Keep the element in their neighborhood, not in ours." A noticeable chill rolls through the room. Ellison slumps back down. "My watch recorded every word spoken to me last night," Carter explains, "including the things you said when you thought they wouldn't be heard." Officials trade looks. Anger, disbelief, grim recognition. Finally, Carter says, "We come to the written trail." Emails, texts, and memos cascade across the monitors, each one bridging the gap between intent and action. On one screen, an email from Riker to his squad. "Use the checkpoint quota system we discussed. Ellison wants Ridgeview arrest numbers up." On another, internal demographic reports, arrest rates by race, search rates by zip code, conviction outcomes sorted by neighborhood. The graphs lean hard in one direction. Checkpoint stops resulted in arrests for black drivers at 7 times the rate of white drivers for identical alleged violations, Carter summarizes. Side-by-side arrest reports appear, same offense, different race, wildly different outcomes. But the most telling documents, she continues, go back to the program's beginning. City planning files, developer emails, and contribution records appear in sequence. Councilman Ellison received substantial campaign support from developers eyeing Ridgeview for revitalization, Carter says. Their business model depended on existing residents being pushed out. Emails show phrases like soft displacement and lawful pressure. The checkpoints became the tool, she explains. Harassment at the margins, tickets, arrests, constant fear. Property values drop. Developers step in to buy cheap. She pauses, letting the implications sink in. These weren't random civil rights violations, she concludes. They were profit-driven. Ellison's attorney leans in, urgently whispering into his ear. Ellison shakes his head, still trying to brazen it out. This is all twisted, he insists. Politically motivated. The evidence speaks louder than any spin, Carter says. And we're not done yet. She gestures to Marquez. Detective Marquez conducted his own quiet investigation from inside your department. Marquez stands, plugging his USB drive into the system. I tracked how checkpoint assignments were distributed, he says. Performance reviews tied to arrest numbers in specific neighborhoods appear on screen. Officers were rewarded for higher Ridgeview arrests, criticized for underperforming if their numbers weren't high enough there. Another document appears. Checkpoint schedules triangulating black churches, community centers, and small businesses. We were told to maintain presence around these locations, Marquez explains. Translated, it meant, keep people nervous. Most disturbing, Marquez continues, were the complaint patterns. Forms marked resolved with no investigation notes. Witness statements edited into bland non-issues. Noticeable gaps where video evidence should have been. Any resident who tried to challenge treatment at a checkpoint found the process rigged against them, he says. The system wasn't just biased on the street. It was designed to bury pushback. The room falls into a heavy silence as the full picture settles. This operation was never just about what happened to me, Carter says finally. I volunteered to run the checkpoint gauntlet because we already knew what we were going to find. My experience matched months of intelligence perfectly, she adds. Carter turns toward Ellison. Your program violated the Fourth Amendment, targeted citizens by race and zip code, and then sabotaged any attempt to seek redress. A senior Justice Department attorney rises. From what we've seen, she says, there's ample basis for federal civil rights and conspiracy charges. Ellison looks around wildly for an alley and finds none. This is blown out of proportion, he protests. The checkpoints had legitimate public safety goals. If that were true, Carter replies, the data wouldn't look like this, nor would your own statements bragging about keeping undesirable people in their place. You engineered this, Ellison insists, pointing at Carter. You baited officers, forced this confrontation. I drove through a public roadway leaving my home, Carter says. The only reason it exploded is because the system reacted to me exactly as it does to everyone else from Ridgeview. She pulls up one last document, a classified authorization signed by the Secretary of Defense. This is the formal order launching the Pentagon's investigation, she explains. It followed multiple reports from service members, Black, Latino, Asian, who experienced harassment at your checkpoints. Realization crashes over Ellison's face. This wasn't a stunt. It was a full-scale operation. The investigation phase is complete, Carter announces. From here, federal prosecutors and civil rights divisions will handle charging decisions. A Pentagon investigator connects a final laptop, synchronizing all evidence logs. This record stretches back 3 years, he notes. FBI agents step forward toward Riker, Nolan, and several other officers flagged in red on a roster. Justice Department attorneys move toward Ellison. Councilman Marcus Ellison, the lead prosecutor, says, "You are under active federal investigation for civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and obstruction of justice." Ellison shoves back his chair. "I need to address the press," he declares. "Control the narrative." He strides toward the rear exit, but 2 military police officers are already stationed there, polite, but immovable. A week later, the scene shifts to Washington, D.C. A packed congressional hearing room buzzes with reporters, staffers, and observers. General Veronica Carter sits at the witness table in full dress blues, 4 stars gleaming, decorations lining her chest. The committee chair bangs a gavel. This hearing on civil rights enforcement in local policing is now in session, she announces. General Carter, thank you for appearing today. Carter adjusts the microphone with practiced ease. Thank you for inviting my testimony, she replies. Cameras from every major network lock onto her. A general, the chair says, please summarize the Pentagon's work in Greenfield for the record. Approximately 6 months ago, Carter begins, the Department of Defense started receiving reports from service members describing discriminatory treatment at police checkpoints in Greenfield. She explains how initial reviews uncovered repeated constitutional violations, largely concentrated in minority neighborhoods. As we dug deeper, she says, we found a system designed to treat certain communities as perpetual suspects. A large screen shows simplified versions of the maps and charts. Our findings confirmed systemic Fourth Amendment violations, Carter continues. People were detained, searched, and arrested without probable cause. When they invoked their rights, charges escalated instead of stopping. A committee member interrupts. Why did the Pentagon lead this, rather than deferring immediately to the Justice Department? Because the first complaints came from uniformed personnel, Carter answers. We have a duty to protect our people, on and off base. Once we realized civilians were facing identical treatment, we coordinated closely with DOJ. She resumes the presentation, highlighting how checkpoints encircled Ridgeview and similar districts. Residents had to pass through these nets to reach jobs, schools, groceries, she explains. That daily gauntlet became a tool of control. Charts of arrest disparities and charging outcomes appear, stripped of names but not impact. Perhaps most alarming, Carter says, was that these practices carried explicit political backing. She explains Ellison's role in designing and defending the program. A different committee member leans close to his microphone. What's the status of the individuals responsible? Councilman Ellison is facing federal civil rights charges, Carter replies. Captain Riker and several officers have been indicted. The checkpoint program has been permanently dismantled. She adds, all convictions tied to unconstitutional stops are currently under review for expungement and possible restitution. The chair nods slowly. General, your choice to personally enter the checkpoint system was unusual. What drove that decision? Policy looks one way on paper, Carter answers. It looks very different from the driver's seat of a sedan with black plates heading out of Ridgeview. She lets that sit. I knew my rank might offer some protection after the fact, she continues, but the point was to experience what ordinary residents did, with no advance warning. Another committee member, more sympathetic, speaks up. I'd like to recognize Detective Leo Marquez, she says, gesturing to the audience. Without his courage, we might never have seen this clearly. Marquez stands briefly. The room breaks into respectful applause. Carter nods toward him. He represents the best of law enforcement, she says. The public often hears about officers who abuse power, Carter continues. We also need to amplify those who put their careers at risk to confront that abuse. The chair refocuses. General, what reforms do you recommend to prevent similar programs in other cities? Carter doesn't hesitate. Independent oversight for checkpoint and stop operations. Mandatory demographic tracking for every stop and search. Public reporting of patterns. Clear consequences when departments show persistent disparities. She looks down the line of the lawmakers. Most importantly, we must stop treating constitutional rights as optional guidelines. They don't bend for zip codes, bank accounts, or skin color. Pens scratch furiously as staffers jot notes. The hearing stretches on for hours. Carter answers questions about data methods, coordination with DOJ, and safeguards for future whistleblowers. She keeps returning to the central idea. Equal protection isn't a slogan, it's architecture. As the session wraps, the chair announces proposed legislation, federal standards for checkpoint operations, transparency requirements, and automatic federal review. Triggers when disparities spike. Outside the chamber, Carter finds Marquez waiting. "They were impressed by your files," she tells him. "The FBI's Civil Rights Division offered you a position." He smiles. "I accepted. If I'm going to help rebuild trust, I need to be in the room where cases are made." "And your brother?" Carter asks. "Record wiped," Marquez says. "He's back at the Children's Hospital, and he's helping organize a class action for other victims." Carter nods. "Justice is slow," she says. "But when good people insist, it moves." 2 months later, in Ridgeview's community center, folding chairs fill a multi-purpose room. Residents crowd in for a town hall with the city's newly appointed police chief. Carter, dressed in plain clothes, slips into a back row. At the front, Marquez, no longer a detective, now a federal liaison, helps facilitate discussion between residents and local officers. The new chief outlines reforms: always-on body cams, public stop data dashboards, genuine civilian oversight. After the meeting, an elderly black woman approaches Carter, eyeing her thoughtfully. "You're the general, aren't you?" she says. "The one who helped tear those checkpoints down." Carter smiles softly. "I was one piece of a bigger effort," she answers. "The truth did the heavy lifting." The woman shakes her head. "My grandson was arrested at one of those stops, lost his scholarship, couldn't get decent work. Now his record's cleared, and he's back in college." Carter's eyes warm. "I'm glad he got another chance." "He doesn't just want one," the woman adds. "He wants to make them. Says he's going to law school. Says somebody needs to know the law well enough to stop this from happening again." Carter's smile widens. "He's right," she says. "Knowing your rights is the first line of defense." The woman nods. "He watches your hearings on his phone," she adds proudly. "Says you proved the system can be pushed." Outside, Marquez waits by a government sedan. "Headed back to D.C.?" he asks. "Pentagon wants a full briefing on how Greenfield's reforms are progressing," Carter replies. As they drive past the intersection where the old checkpoint once stood, only normal traffic and a bus stop remain. No cones, no cruisers, no fear thickening the air. "The checkpoint's gone," Marquez observes, "but the work isn't." "It never is," Carter agrees, watching families cross the street without glancing around for flashing lights. "This," she gestures toward kids biking and elders chatting on stoops, "is what security should look like. People living their lives without bracing for harassment." Back in Washington months later, the gavel falls again. "This hearing is adjourned," the committee chair announces, "but our efforts continue." Carter steps into bright sunlight on the Capitol steps, reporters shouting questions she doesn't stop to entertain. 6 months pass. In a Pentagon conference room, she stands before a national map pulsing with data. Colonel Jackson enters carrying a stack of reports. "New oversight metrics look promising," he says. 17 departments have voluntarily restructured checkpoint or stop-and-frisk practices. "And the holdouts?" Carter asks. "Justice has opened formal investigations into 9 jurisdictions showing Greenfield-like patterns," Jackson answers. On the wall screens, Clusters of red highlight familiar warning signs, checkpoints, ring fencing minority neighborhoods, lopsided stop ratios, suspiciously low complaint follow-through. The Greenfield model's doing what we hoped, Jackson adds, catching systemic discrimination early before it buries itself, Carter nods. And our own personnel? Incidents reported by service members about local police have dropped over 60%, he says. The direct report system is working. Carter's secure phone buzzes on the table. A message from Marquez. Ellison sentenced. 5 years plus, restitution fund mandated. She exhales, not triumphantly, but with a quiet, grim satisfaction. Her aide steps in. General, your next appointment is here. A young black woman in Air Force blues enters, mid to late 20s, posture razor straight. Lieutenant Janelle Warren, Carter greets her, recently detained at a checkpoint near Maxwell Air Force Base. Warren salutes. Yes, ma'am. When I heard about Greenfield, I realized my experience wasn't isolated. That's why I filed. You did the right thing, Carter says. Every report helps us see the pattern more clearly. Honestly, ma'am, I thought maybe I was overreacting, Warren admits. Until I compared notes with other black officers on base. Same road, same deputies, same excuses, Carter nods. Now that we have multiple consistent accounts, we'll do what we did in Greenfield. Follow the evidence wherever it leads. She walks to the window with Warren, both looking out over the Pentagon courtyard filled with uniforms of every background. The uniform doesn't inoculate us from discrimination, Carter says, but it does give us both a louder voice and a heavier responsibility to uphold the Constitution. Warren absorbs that quietly. That's why I reported it, she says. Not just for me. Exactly, Carter replies. Once you see a pattern, you have a duty to act. She turns back to the glowing map. Markers dot the country, some resolved, others mid-investigation, many improving. No more invisible checkpoints, Carter says. No more policies that only feel neutral from certain zip codes. She pulls up Warren's jurisdiction on the map and tags it for preliminary review. We'll start with data, then interviews, then site work if needed, she explains. Same playbook, same insistence that the law mean the same thing on every side of town. Warren stands a little taller, clearly understanding she's just joined something larger than a single complaint. Hours later, after briefings and calls, Carter remains alone with the screens. No checkpoints, she murmurs. No double standards, just equal justice. The national map glows in the dim room, each light an unresolved question, a community waiting for fairness. She knows there will be more hearings, more pushback, more politicians insisting their programs are misunderstood. There will be officers like Riker, sure they're just doing their jobs, and officers like Marquez resisting the current. And there will be residents like that grandmother in Ridgeview, measuring justice not in speeches, but in cleared records and safe commutes. Carter picks up her pen and starts outlining the next oversight deployment. The story doesn't end with one city or one councilman, she thinks. It continues every time a stop happens without cause, every time a complaint form disappears, every time someone decides to speak up anyway. The screens cycle through, updating. Some markers turn from red to yellow to green as departments reform under pressure. Others flare brighter, demanding attention. Carter's job is to keep watching, to keep pushing, to make sure Greenfield is the beginning, not a one-off headline. She closes a folder labeled Joint Task Force, Civil Rights Oversight, and opens a new one. There will always be another jurisdiction, another pattern, another chance to choose accountability. Across the country, content creators and storytellers begin picking up Greenfield as a case study. Podcasts dissect the legal angles. Law students study the data. Activists use it to train volunteers on documenting stops. One particular channel specializes in voice-only justice thrillers, stories told like late-night radio, all tension and release. They produce an episode dramatizing Carter's operation, names changed, but stakes intact, letting listeners feel the anxiety of a simple drive home turning dangerous and the satisfaction of seeing a corrupt system cracked open by facts. The story spreads, not as propaganda, but as a warning and a blueprint. Listeners respond because the narrative feels real. Ordinary people running errands, heading to work, trying to live quietly, and a checkpoint deciding their future. The channel leans into that tension, highlighting how fragile rights feel when power goes unchecked and how powerful those same rights become when someone actually enforces them. Episodes like the Greenfield story keep commuters glued to their earbuds, gym-goers staying on the treadmill, an extra 10 minutes just to hear the next twist. The show's style is simple. One compelling voice, razor-sharp pacing, and a promise that the truth, while sometimes buried, is never entirely gone. You might have felt that yourself listening to stories like this, your jaw tightening when the cuffs go on, your shoulders loosening when the evidence finally lands, when the corrupt realize the game has shifted. That's the hook. Justice as a narrative you can feel in your chest. These voice-first thrillers are built for multitasking, driving, cleaning, working out, pulling you into intense moments of injustice and walking you step by step to accountability. Every episode reminds you that systems are made of choices, that rights are only as strong as the people insisting they apply to everyone, not just the comfortable. So if this kind of story grabbed you, if you caught yourself holding your breath when Carter refused to back down, or felt that quiet satisfaction when data and courage finally cornered Ellison, there's more where that came from. These creators drop weekly narratives about people facing impossible odds, standing up to rigged systems, and refusing to accept that's just how it is. They specialize in sharp twists, grounded stakes, and resolutions that feel earned, not convenient. It's premium, voice-only storytelling tailored for people who want substance with their suspense, who like their entertainment served with a side of accountability and hope. Stick around for more justice-driven thrillers that do more than pass the time. They remind you why fairness matters and how fragile it can be when nobody's watching. Turn on notifications so you're there the moment the next story hits. Whether it's another checkpoint investigation, a workplace whistleblower tale, or a courtroom showdown where the underdog refuses to fold. Every listen, every share, every comment helps push these narratives higher, making it a little harder for real-world abuses to stay in the dark. If this journey through Greenfield's checkpoints kept you locked in, consider it your cue. Tap that follow, hit that like, and help amplify stories that put justice and accountability front and center. These aren't just tales of corruption and downfall. They're reminders that systems can be challenged, that data and courage still matter, and that ordinary people can force impossible conversations. Subscribe so you don't miss the next voice-only deep dive into power, prejudice, and the long, messy path toward fairness. Because in a world full of noise, justice told well still cuts through, and your support helps keep that signal loud. Lesson 1. Power can be misused anywhere, And rank won't always protect you. For those of us who have watched this country change over 6 or 7 decades, there's something chilling about General Veronica Carter's story. Many of you remember the days when a wrong turning into the wrong neighborhood could mean trouble, no matter how carefully you lived your life. You may have seen loved ones stopped, searched, or spoken to like criminals for no reason except their skin color or address. What makes Carter's ordeal so powerful is that she isn't a teenager with sagging jeans or a young man blasting loud music. She's a 4-star Marine Corps general, a woman who has spent her life defending the very Constitution the checkpoint officers trampled on. Yet even she is pulled from her car, handcuffed, mocked, and told that her rights don't really matter. For older Americans, this is both familiar and deeply unsettling. We were taught that if you worked hard, served your country, dressed respectably, and followed the rules, you would be safe. Carter's experience reminds us that for many Black Americans, safety has never been guaranteed. Not in 1963, not in 1993, and not today. If a woman with 4 stars on her shoulder can be dismissed as a troublemaker from Ridgeview Park, what does that say for everyone else? The first lesson is sobering but honest. Power can be misused anywhere, and sometimes the only thing standing between abuse and accountability is the courage to say, clearly and calmly, "This is wrong, and I will not let it slide." Older generations know that feeling. We've seen rights written on paper, then ignored on the street. Carter's stand pulls that gap into the light. Lesson 2. Documentation, data, and ordinary courage can crack a rigged system. Many of you grew up in a time when a handshake was enough and taking someone's word was common. But you also lived through eras when people's words were twisted or simply denied. In Carter's story, the turning point isn't just her rank, it's her preparation, her watch recording every word, the Pentagon system tracking her GPS, the young woman quietly filming at the checkpoint, Detective Marquez copying files onto a small USB drive, knowing they could disappear by morning. These are not movie-style heroics. They are quiet acts of courage and careful documentation by people who are tired of being told, "That never happened," or "You're exaggerating." For older adults, this may sound like a new version of an old truth. During the civil rights era, people carried small tape recorders, saved newspaper clippings, and wrote down badge numbers on scraps of paper. Today, it's body cams, cell phones, and data sets. But the principle is the same. Systems that abuse power can be exposed when ordinary people decide to keep records and refuse to be talked out of what they know they saw. Marquez, especially, speaks to something many of you understand. He is not perfect, not a saint. He stayed quiet for a while. He worried about his career. But eventually, his brother's humiliation at a checkpoint pushed him past fear. He started preserving emails, logs, and memos. In the end, that quiet persistence, added to Carter's operation, gave federal investigators the evidence they needed. The second lesson is clear. When courage and documentation come together, even a deeply rigged system can crack. Lesson 3. Real reform takes time, but it changes lives down to the grandchild level. If you're 65 or older, you know better than anyone that lasting change rarely happens overnight. You've watched presidents come and go, programs announced with fanfare, then forgotten. What makes the Greenfield story different is not just that the checkpoints were taken down. It's that real, long-term work followed. Carter doesn't stop at exposing the abuse. She helps build a new structure. Data dashboards, independent oversight, automatic reviews when disparities appear. These are the unglamorous tools of real reform. It's the kind of steady, patient work many of you recognize from your own lives, whether it was paying off a mortgage dollar by dollar, caring for a sick spouse, or helping a grandchild learn to read one page at a time. We see the fruit of that work in ordinary moments. A young black man getting his record cleared and returning to college. A pediatric surgeon no longer detained on his way to the hospital. A grandmother in Ridgeview who no longer has to worry if her grandchildren will make it safely across town. We see it in the way Marquez moves from frustrated local detective to federal civil rights investigator, using his pain to protect others. And we see it in the next generation, law students, podcasters, and community leaders who use the Greenfield case as both a warning and a guide. For many older Americans, this is where the story really hits home. You've spent years asking, will anything ever truly change? Carter's work doesn't promise perfection. There will be new abuses, new fights, new hearings. But her story shows that determined oversight, backed by facts and moral courage, can reshape daily life so that your children and grandchildren can drive to work, visit church, or go to the grocery store without feeling like criminals in their own city. In the end, the question for those of us in our later years is simple but profound. What kind of country are we leaving behind? Greenfield's checkpoints were a reminder of the worst parts of our past, but their dismantling and the reforms that followed remind us that we're not powerless. We may move a little slower, check our blood pressure more often, and talk about doctor's appointments more than we used to, but our voices still matter. Carter's story is not just a thriller. It's an invitation to stay engaged, to pay attention, and to insist that the rights we watched people march for in the 1960s remain real on every street corner today. If General Carter's journey through those Greenfield checkpoints stirred something in you, maybe memories of past marches, or times you saw someone treated unfairly on the side of the road, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe careful documentation, community courage, and real oversight can truly change how justice works in everyday life? Or does it still feel like the deck is stacked? Share your own experiences or hopes in the comments. Tap like if this spoke to you, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you won't miss the next justice-driven story we explore together.